Malign Portents. The final witness. I should have listened to her. I should have run, but I had to see for myself what lay at the end of all things. Gazing into my fire, I had borne witness to the horrors that were manifesting throughout the realms. I, Elias, a simple scryer of fates, had seen the portents that had foretold this doom, and in turn I had been seen by one possessed of power far beyond my own. In my ignorance I thought I was just an observer, separated from the wars of gods and mortals. But I was a fool. Desperate for understanding, I looked into the flames once more, seeking out others who had read the signs. I saw the vast armies that had gathered in Shaiish, and I had watched their processions led towards the same mass grave. They were heading towards the great city of the necromancer. They were marching upon Nagashazar. The forces of order were the first to step upon the vast, lifeless plain that stretched south of the city. Led by a Lord Celestant clad in black and gold, and shielded by the magics of the Slan Star Masters, they marched forward through the raw flows of necromantic energy that had coalesced in the center of the realm. The dead poured out from Nagashazar to meet them, endless columns of skeletal soldiers, cannibal thralls, and deadwalker hordes. Howling spirits and winged monstrosities soared through the skies, striking fear into the souls of the living, and morbid engines of bone and sinew drifted south towards their enemy. As this host advanced, I saw its grim general, an ancient vampire whose name was synonymous with terror and cruelty, Nagash's Mortarch of Night. But before the lines of order and death met, the Mortarch brought his legion to a halt. There they waited, a mere league from out of the gates of Nagashazar, as the forces of order marched steadily towards them. It was then that I saw the paths of fate crystallizing. A Chaos Lord of Gur brought his armies flooding over the horizon from the east, tearing onto the plain with terrifying speed, heading straight toward the left flank of the Lord Celestant's army. His frenzied and sadistic warriors charged with reckless abandon, whilst his spell-weavers and rot-addled henchmen rained obliteration down upon their hated enemies. I heard the howls of grotesque pleasure and the screams of agony. I saw flesh burn. I saw blood spill. As the forces of order squared off against this newly arrived foe, the clangor of battle resounded across the desolate plain, carrying into the east to hordes of greenskins led by a Warog prophet. They were almost upon the walls of Nagashazar. The brutal greenskin tribes had their city in their sights, but upon hearing the sounds of battle coming from the south, their attention was diverted. In the din of combat, the prophet perceived the war to which his visions had drawn him. He steered his forces south of the city to where the armies of Chaos and Order were locked in combat. He called out his warg, and his warriors barreled into the fray. The Lord Celestant's army was trapped, chaos on one side, destruction on the other. As bravely as the warriors of Order fought, they could not hold formation against the crush. Piles of fresh dead began to grow among the carnage, yet the fallen did not stay down for long. Mortally wounded bodies rose to their feet, taking up whatever weapons they could before turning on the living. Dismembered corpses clawed at their erstwhile allies, tearing at the flesh of whatever warriors were nearest. It was then that the Mortarch at last moved his legion forward, advancing with grave certainty towards the rapidly dwindling invaders. At that moment, I thought the last glimmer of hope had faded. The armies of the mortal realms had marched against Nagash, and had come so close. But at the last, their bitter hatred for one another had spelled death for us all. Yet, this was not the end. The deafening crack sounded on the far side of the city. The choking lakes of tar that flanked Nagashazar's northern border began to overflow, sending great waves of black sludge flooding forth. From this viscous muck emerged thousands and thousands of green-skinned brutes, bellowing in fury as they charged towards Nagash's city. Where they had come from I could not see, for whatever force had guided them into Shaiish was barring my vision. The leader of this mysterious horde was an enormous auroch, his face marked by a vicious wound and his right eye missing. From atop his monstrous steed he called out to his fellow creatures of destruction, and in a surge of green flesh they crashed into the outermost wall of Nagashazar. I had not thought it possible, but as the night gave way to dawn, the wall crumbled before the might of the attacking horde. Brutish warriors poured into Nagashazar's outer district, smashing through statues dedicated to the Lord of Undeath. Startled necromancers summoned their unloving minions to hold back the green tide, and from further within the city, reinforcements marched with desperate haste to meet the intruders. To the south, the surprise attack did not go unnoticed. The Mortarch split his army, leading the bulk of his forces back to the city to stem the influx of Orruk. With the Deathly Legion divided, the Lord Celestant was at last able to drive what was left of his army northward. His warriors hacked into the remaining skeletons and deadwalkers, pressing ever forward, trampling over dead before they could rise once more. Behind them, the Destruction Horde spied a new enemy that they had not yet fought, and charged headlong into the blood-slick forces of the Chaos Lord. It was though the flames of hope had been rekindled. From the north, Nagashazar was assailed by Orruk, while by the south, the Lord Celestant's army inched ever closer. The clouds of dread began to part in my mind, and I looked once more to the Portents to see if victory could be achieved. Was it possible? Could death be defeated? Could the mortal realms prevail? No, these things would not come to pass. As I stared deeper into the dwindling fires, I saw before me the great black pyramid, a dark scar in reality floating above the heart of Nagash's city. It was the locus of fates, the end of all things, towards which the energy of an entire realm was being drawn. As I looked upon it, I saw only death, for it was the limit of existence, beyond which all life would cease to be. It was already complete. Nagash had already won.